Hello everyone. Today we're going to be covering the deadlift. Today, specifically, we're covering the conventional deadlift, which, there is a lot to be said about the deadlift, but there's almost not enough words to be able to say what needs to be said. I think one of the biggest things with the deadlift is, people talk about the risk to reward, that you're taking in a lot of risk for not a whole lot of benefit. Now, I would actually say that there is some truth to that. Because I think people either undermine the complexity of the deadlift or oversimplify the complexity of the deadlift. So they make it seem that the deadlift is not that big of a deal. Anyone can do it. Yes, that is true, but that doesn't mean everyone can do it properly. But at the same time, it's no joke. It is a movement that if you mess up, you will pay for it, and you might pay for it permanently, because a deadlift injury, what they're usually referring to is your lower back. You're going to tear it up, and if your lower back gets torn up, it's going to stop you from doing so many movements. So squatting will be out of the picture. Pretty much any leg exercise will start to cause pain because it involves your lower back in some capacity. So I think that's one of the biggest risks that you're running with deadlift is a lower back injury, but it can definitely be avoided, especially if you're watching this video. So thanks to us, right?
Right.
So we're covering the conventional today. There's a difference between the conventional and the sumo. When I work with someone, I always kind of tell them which one feels best for you, because while people want to memify the sumo deadlift and say it's cheating, they don't know what they're talking about. They never train real people in real life. A lot of the times, just the anatomy or that the way that they understand the deadlift causes problems. As far as like the conventional doesn't feel right, they're not grasping it, it's hurting their back, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to deadlift. We're going to figure out how to deadlift in some capacity. So that usually means deciding between the conventional deadlift, the sumo deadlift, or starting with the trap bar deadlift. The trap bar deadlift. Okay? But today we're going to be covering the conventional deadlift. Now, as far as your setup goes, this is one of the most important things. I feel like there's two things that mess most people up. The first thing is not understanding your foot position. So I've seen this a lot. You've probably seen this too, where people roll the bar before they deadlift. So they start to do it and they'll roll it out, all the way out, and then they'll squat all the way down and then start exactly like this and then deadlift this. Yeah. Now, Sam is actually very strong, so she can do this wrong without any problem. But the thing is that if you drop your hips in the deadlift, if you're not your anatomy isn't built for it like this, once it gets heavy, your hips are going to shoot up or your back is going to round and you're going to end up picking it up like that, and that's what leads into injury. The second problem, or the second mistake that most people make, is that they don't realize how important it is to breathe and brace in the deadlift. It's important with any exercise, but you will pay for it tenfold if you don't do this in the deadlift. So what that usually looks like, we've been covering this in the series of videos that we've been doing, is you usually have to breathe before you pick it up. So she has a belt, she feels the tightness in her belt, and then she deadlifts, there you go, with no problem. Her core is tightened, it's stabilized, she doesn't feel any pain in her lower back because she's breathing and bracing. And that is one thing a lot of people miss. They miss the breathing and bracing. So, I heard this a long time ago. I'm going to repeat the same thing just because it was a great cue. When you do the deadlift, you set the bar, set it straight, set it leveled. After you set the bar, do not move the bar anymore. Leave it alone. Don't move it. Don't touch it. Don't do anything with it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it.
I wasn't going to touch it.
No, don't touch it.
I was just pointing at it.
Well, don't point even.
Don't even point?
No.
You need to step into the bar. And what that usually looks like is the bar is right over your shoelace knot, so that there is some space between you and the bar. It's very little. Yeah, it's like that much. So that's what you do first. Now, as far as your foot stance goes, it really is sort of a matter of comfortability or what you feel the best in, just because I've noticed everyone is different. One thing I'll tell you this right now, that the deadlift is probably one of those exercises that almost becomes ritualistic, because people need to have their setup, their form intact. They need to line up all their cues in their head for it to feel right. So it's actually fun in that way. It's kind of special because it's such a step-by-step process with little rituals that the individual has to do to perform it correctly. But that kind of carries over to their foot stance. Because one thing I've seen, I think, Sam, when you do conventional, you're pretty much feet inside of the smooth. But I've met like a lot of bigger guys, they go foot where the knurling and the smooth splits their foot in half. Like that. Or some people go really close like a V, like this, with their toes pointed outward, and they feel strong like that. Yeah. So it just kind of depends. But I would say you need a base level understanding for it to feel good, and then from there you can play around with it. So what I would say is feet inside the smooth. Turn your toes out just a little bit. That usually just helps people use their glutes a little bit more. A little space, bar right over your shoelace knot. Remember, you walk up to the bar. You don't move the bar to you. When it comes to the deadlift, you cannot dive to grab it. Yes, like that. What you want is long arms. Your arms are just hooks. You're not actually pulling the deadlift up. I'm going to tell you how you complete it, but that's what I want you to ingrain into your head right now, is that your arms are just long and they're just hooks. So when you go down to grab the deadlift, make sure your arm is straight. Now, Sam is going to do something. I'm going to show you what you need to do. But her arms are so long, when she comes down to grab it, her wrist doesn't break. I've noticed that a lot of people, they dip too long and their wrist breaks like that. But then that's going to lead into a bunch of problems later on. I'm going to explain in a bit. But don't do that. Avoid that. Make sure that your arms are long, so when you extend, you just end up grabbing it like that. Once you go to grab the bar, there's going to be 2 steps that you need to take after grabbing the bar, which is the slack and the wedge. These are 2 very important, very small, minor details that you need to accomplish correctly if you want to get a good pull from the floor without any energy leaks. Now, the slack is important because the way that the slack works is that there's a diameter of the plate, right? And there's the barbell inside of the plate. There is enough space inside of the barbell that it can move around. It'll rattle, like you'll be able to hear it. That's the slack. So when you pull, you want to make sure that you close the gap in the barbell and the plate before you pull. So you want to think about it like a train. All the train cabooses have to link up for the train to glide smoothly. Same thing. Otherwise, you just crash and then move forward. You want to avoid that. That's an energy leak. The deadlift is very important on avoiding energy leaks. So when Sam goes to pick up the bar, long arms, she's going to pull without pulling. She's going to pull the deadlift till she hears that click. And then that means that the slack is pulled. But once you pull the slack, you don't want to relax the slack again. Like that. You could hear the slack relax. You don't want to relax. You want to pull the slack and sustain the pull without actually lifting it from the floor. Well, she did that anyway, but that's all right. But that's the point, is you're just pulling the slack, hear the click in the barbell and the plate, and then pull. Okay. All right. The second thing is called the wedge. This is something that I missed for the longest time. I even taught Sam how to do it the wrong way before I learned this very, very, very important thing. The deadlift is, yes, it is a posterior chain movement, meaning that it primarily targets your lower back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. That's where most of the work you're going to feel when you perform the deadlift. But if you want a good break from the floor, that means when the plate actually leaves the floor, if you want a good break, your quads are going to be the ones that help you break it from the floor. So that is where the wedge comes in. So that's why you created that small space between the your shins, and the bar, is because what Sam is going to do is she's going to drive her knees forward until her shins touch the bar. She's going to pull the slack, and now her quads are activated, meaning her quads are going to give her power to pull from the floor.
Show it all the way.
Yeah. Slack, and then wedge, and then pull. Okay, very good. Now, as far as completing the deadlift, a lot of people get this wrong. They think that the deadlift is a it is a pulling exercise, but they think that it's an exercise that relies on their arms to pull up. So a lot of the times people will grab the deadlift and shrug up. Yep. Shrug up, or they, also bring their head back when they're gonna pull. So they lead with their head up like that to try to get the deadlift to come up. I used to do the exact same thing. But the thing that you have to understand is that the deadlift is not a movement that completes from you picking it up off of the floor like that. It is a movement that completes from your hips being back. So if you want, get in position, your hips are back, and your hips have to come forward for the deadlift to complete. So that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring your hips from here forward. That is what completes the deadlift, not bringing your head back and shrugging it up. Or when people start to hitch, again, because people hitch because they think that they have to bring it up. But all you have to do is close your hips, shoot your hips forward. So that kind of leads into like, where should your head be and what should you visualize when you're doing the deadlift? I'm just kind of laughing because I've told so many people so many different things. But one of the biggest things is you want to hump the bar, essentially, when you're doing the deadlift. So when you're thinking of coming up, you're kind of doing a glute hip thrust. However, that doesn't mean that you want to hyperextend on the deadlift. So that means that when you pick it up, you don't want to do, a lot of people do this. I see a lot of influencers do this. It's not good form. Because once it gets heavy, you're going to feel it in your lower back. What you want to do is you want to get your setup, right? Slack, wedge, and you want to hump the bar. Smash it. Smash your hips into the bar like that. Now, yeah. Exactly. Perfect. That helps generate power with your glutes and your posterior chain. It generates power. And that's how you complete the deadlift. If you're fighting and struggling, just think, hump the bar, and you're going to complete the deadlift. As far as the headline goes, where your head line goes, the reason why I'll tell people, I actually heard this from a strongman a long time ago. He'll put a towel under his chin to tuck his chin in. Because I used to make the mistake of bringing my head back and wanting to lead, and my deadlifts would always fail. I wouldn't get the lockout, all of that. But when I started to keep my eye line like on the floor, it's kind of like a diagonal line, keep your chin tucked in, it really helped me focus on humping the bar. It was more effective to do that when I was just looking down and just focusing on bringing my hips through rather than focusing on bringing my head back. Okay?
If you're a girl and you wear a necklace and there's a mirror, just stare at your necklace.
Yeah, perfect.
That'll keep your head like in the right spot.
Great. Yeah, that's a good one. You kind of start to see how simple but kind of complicated the deadlift is. There's a lot of sequence of cues that have to go in place for you to be able to perform it correctly. So I would say that the biggest problem with the deadlift is that there's actually a long list of things that you have to avoid and a short list of things that you have to do. But having that balance in between each one is a thing that people struggle with. They don't know how to put it all together, and that's why their form is off. Now, let's talk about a few other things, right? Because one of the biggest things, I know that Sam, when you went down and grabbed it, you kind of did it already, but this is a mistake that I heard when I first started deadlifting. Someone told me to sit back, sit down, drop your hips. When you go to, now, what that usually looks like is you go down and grab it, right? And she's almost squatting down to get the deadlift. That doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily have to do that. That kind of depends on your anatomy. So some people might have low hips, some people might have high hips. It just kind of depends on your anatomy. If you want to figure out what your hip height should be, when you have the space and you go down to grab it, once you wedge, your shoulder, elbow, and knee should be in a line like this. If your elbow's a little bit in front of you, you're going to tilt forward, but you don't want that. So she wants to sit back just a little bit, but right there. See, she didn't drop her hips when she sat back, right? She just kind of loaded evenly in her foot. She probably, I'm assuming you're going to say yes, but you have a balanced load between your heel and the ball of your foot, right? You're not all the way in on your ball of your foot, but you're not also all the way in your heel, right? So once she closes that gap with the wedge, that's going to be her ideal setup. She doesn't have to drop her hips more than that, because if she does, what's going to happen with her, like go ahead and squat. If she does drop her hips, once it's heavy, her hips are going to shoot first, and then she's going to pick it up, and that's going to create an energy leak. She's just wasted a bunch of energy trying to get into the proper position that her anatomy wants to be in, and then pick up the deadlift. Okay? Now, I will say this, because this is another like sort of misinformation that I heard when I first started lifting is people would say, practice your deadlift with light weight. I don't think so. Because when it's light, you can move it however you want and it's not going to punish you. But when it's at a moderately heavy weight or like close to your working weight, then your technique will start to suffer and then you'll start paying for it. But it's not enough that it causes a lot of injury. So I would say if you want to dial in your deadlift technique, practice with a moderately heavy weight, a weight that kind of challenges you, I would say.
Yeah, because at this weight, I can make all the mistakes
and you won't feel it.
Like I won't feel it, but
let's go through the sequence of things that you should do and just make sure that if you're trying to do the deadlift correctly, you're checking off all of these things. Okay? So remember, walk up to the bar, don't move the bar, just pick your stance. So you set the bar, you walk up to it, the bar should be over your shoelace knot. Okay? Arms are long. This is a beginner tutorial, by the way. We're going to do an advanced one later on, but arms are long. She's going to come down and grab the deadlift. And then from here, she's going to wedge until her shins touch the bar. She's going to pull the slack. She's going to breathe. Yep. And then hump the bar. There you go. Very simple. Now, I will say this. Some things to avoid. In the beginning, practice your deadlift with no straps. The one thing that I've realized as a coach is that when people use straps, they're so hung up on putting the straps on their deadlift. Yep. And then their back is rounding. They're not paying attention. So then when they finally come to pick it up, their form is completely off and nothing is set in the way that it's supposed to be set. So don't use straps if you're beginning to learn the deadlift. Just suck it up. Yeah, owie, it hurts. Yeah, I get it. But it's supposed to, and learn how to do it properly without straps before you finally move on to doing it with straps. Because then you'll finally know, like, what a good setup is. You're going to struggle with holding on to the bar with your deadlift. Now, this is my personal opinion as a coach. This is what I tell people that I train. You can do alternate grip. That's when one hand is over, one hand is under. People say that it doesn't, but I've seen it happen. It will lead to an imbalance in your lat. One lat is in front, one lat is back, and it's going to get to the point where you start windmilling. What is it?
Helicopter?
Yes.
I call it helicopter.
You start helicoptering in your deadlift. That means that when you pick it up, you're kind of rotating when you're trying to complete it. I've seen it happen. They say it doesn't, but I've seen it happen. And that's going to come from alternate grip. People say, well, you could just alternate your alternate grip. And it's sort of like, well, how many times are you going to count? 10 times I did it here, 10 times I did it there. Fuck all that. What I would recommend you do is you move on to hook grip. So if you're doing your grip, we're going to hold this with Sam. If you're doing a double overhand, that's just when you do that, right? You're doing double overhand. Yeah, your thumb is over. Yep. If you're doing hook grip, you're going to put your thumb under and then your fingers over. That's hook grip. Now, we can cover the hook grip tutorial later on, but I would say if you're going to change your grip because you can't hold on to it with the double overhand anymore, switch into a hook grip. Now, you're going to struggle with your grip as well, beyond just hook grip and straps. So one thing I would recommend is use chalk when you're deadlifting. Some gyms don't allow you to use powdered chalk and, it happens. What can you do? But what you could do is move on to liquid chalk. This is a liquid chalk. You pour it in your hands, you rub it, and then wave it off, and then you get chalk on your hands. But this is going to make it so that your grip doesn't slip. It's your hands are dry. You can hold on to the bar, and it doesn't fall out of your hands. And you'd obviously want to pair this with the hook grip. Now, as far as the belt goes, I will say this is a very practical sort of real life thing that ends up happening. Should you get a belt? You should get a belt. But the thing is that if you're overweight and you get a belt, it might throw you off because your gut's kind of getting in the way. So if that is happening to you, then just leave the belt alone. Just learn how to do it without a belt. And then when that tummy of yours disappears, then start throwing the belt on. Because remember, in the beginning, you want to make sure that your technique feels right and dialed in before you do the deadlift. Another thing that I would say is that when it comes to the deadlift, a lot of people do this. You don't have to retract your shoulders back to do the deadlift. In fact, what I usually tell people is because you almost want to look like a gorilla when you do it. You want your arms to be shrugged forward in front of you, and there could be a slight rounding in your upper back, but what you want to avoid is the rounding in your lower back. Your lower back shouldn't be rounded like that, but your upper back can have a little bit more around. You almost want to think of your spine like a fish hook. Like the stem of the fish hook needs to be straight, but the top portion of it could sort of anchor a little bit more. Arch a little bit more. Yes, arch. So avoid that. Make sure you pull the slack and then stand up. And then there you go. All right. So we're just going to review this one more time just so you remember the sequence of events that you need to do. Now, she's going to walk up to the bar over her shoelace knot, long arms. She's going to hook grip because she already does it. Okay. So she's also getting her hook grip ready. She's going to take a big breath, grab the bar, slack, wedge, hump the bar. Keep your chin tucked in. Yeah, exactly. Very good. Yeah, very good.